Welcome back, everybody. This week is massive for Bitcoin, as we're probably going to see a major pump or a major dump back to new lows. And we're going to discuss why that is, analyze some charts, and then look into some institutional buyer data. So let's hop right in. Now, this chart is going to be very, very helpful, and I'll explain it really briefly. It's really more simple than it looks. So here on the left-hand side, we have kind of our color code for the amount of volume for Bitcoin. So the lighter the color, the more volume is expected at that point, and in terms of bids and people wanting to buy. And obviously the darker the color, the less amount of volume. So this is going to kind of help us determine where some of these critical levels are. And then we're going to take this into a chart and kind of apply some of what we learn here. So first off, I want to point out a couple of critical levels here. So first of all, we have this, somewhat light, volume indicator right here, right at about the, 22 to 23 range. Now that's going to be very, very important once we get over to the chart. So I want you guys to remember that, right around here, around that, 23-ish K mark, we have quite a lot of buyer volume interest. Now, the other area I want to note is that this whole area right here, as you can see, completely black, right? I mean, this has some color, but mostly black, meaning, not that much volume. So why that's important is because that means that if we do not hold this level, there really is not much buyer interest all the way until our previous lows here, right? So that's something I definitely wanted to point out to you guys. So meaning that we're really not going to see, if we do not hold our current levels, we're not going to see much support in terms of buyer interest until these previous lows, around that high 17 mark, low 18 mark, right? So it's definitely something to note. We do not have much buyer support right under where we're trending right now. So just wanted to give this visual to you guys in terms of where the buyer interest is. Again, remember that 23-ish K mark, 22K mark in terms of buyer interest. And remember, the other level to the downside of buyer interest is in that, most recent low area, right? High 17s, low 18s. Now, before we get to the charts, one more thing I want to note, and this is on the seller side. So this is something that Bitfinex looks at using their own data, and this is something that they said. So they said there's a significant wall of asks, meaning requests to sell at 23K, just above the 200 weekly moving average. So we're going to look at what that looks like on the actual chart here in a moment. But they're saying there's no guarantee that those asks will stay there or cannot be broken when the price reaches them, but it's worth noting them and therefore being aware of the potential fake out risk around that 200-day weekly moving average level. And so there may be a rejection at that level when we attempt to break through this week. So very, very important that we remember just the 200-day weekly moving average we're going to look at here in the chart, and then also what we looked at in terms of the volume intended between that 23K and then back at those previous lows. So let's hop over to the chart and start breaking this down. So here in the red, we have the 200-day weekly moving average. This is the 200-day simple moving average. For this purpose, we're going to be really focusing on this red line right here. So if you remember, we had a large amount of volume and buy requests here, as well as sell requests. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens up here at this 23K level. The logic behind that is a lot of the times if we see a bounce on top of this weekly moving average and a hold at support, usually we break out after that. That's typically what Bitcoin has done historically in bear markets. So that is kind of the reasoning behind having those asks, not only at 23K, because they likely get filled and they likely get that sell right above that moving average, that weekly moving average point. But also those sells, right? The sells are coming right below that as well. So if we get rejected, the buys, if we get rejected, then there's going to be obviously volume up here, ready to pick up any rejection right about here. So when we look back at that volume chart, just remember that that's where that lies. Now, the other thing I want to note about this is if we do get rejected, we're likely coming back. Remember, we do not have much volume support in this area. So if we do get rejected, we're likely coming back all the way down to previous lows, and then probably playing within this range, hoping to break this and then turn that into support and go again. Now, that's really, really important because this is likely going to play out to this week. The other bearish signal we have on the chart here that I've pulled up is a rising wedge. 9 times out of 10, this is a bearish signal. If this plays out, more than likely we'll see this kind of choke up to the upside and then fall right through and come back down to those lows. Now, obviously, anything can happen in crypto, but the really, really key level, if you take anything out of this video, you have to watch that 200-day weekly moving average, this red line. So right now that sits at about 22.3, 22.4. Really, we're looking at that 23K mark, and that's why you saw both volume, above and below that. That's why we see a lot of asks right at that 200-day weekly moving average, because this tends to be where we either see a breakout or a fake out, right? And so people want to sell at that point before we see a fake out, but they also want to buy at that point before we see that breakout. So breakout or fake out coming essentially pretty soon here for Bitcoin. If we do get rejected here at the red, I would expect us to play down here in this purple rectangle for quite some time, then before returning to this level back up above 18K, right? And we have a lot coming down the pipeline in terms of inflation numbers that could play a big impact in the next few weeks as well for Bitcoin and keep the price pressure down. But at the same time, huge week coming up, because we're likely going to see not only this rising wedge fall out or play out, but we're also going to see this come up against the 200-day weekly moving average. And this tends to be a massively critical point for Bitcoin, where we either see a stand on top of that and we move to the upside, or we see sit below that and come back rejected to new lows. So definitely something we want to keep an eye on. Hopefully that kind of helps you out there. The next thing I want to focus on is the DXY. So this is the dollar index, and this tends to have a inverse correlation with Bitcoin. So as you can see here, just as an example, from this May 30, basically like the first few weeks of June, we saw DXY, pump pretty hard. And at the same period of time, we saw Bitcoin crash, right? And so now we kind of have DXY in somewhat of and this is on the daily chart, we're seeing somewhat of a falling wedge. It's not, quite there yet, but we're seeing some signs of a falling wedge. So, I would be very, very wary and be watching DXY. If we see a DXY breakout here out of, this kind of preliminary falling wedge, we're going to see some heavy downside on Bitcoin. So there's a couple of bearish factors playing into the Bitcoin price action this week, and some bullish factors. I would say, right now with what we've talked about, it's probably leaning more to the bear side, but obviously anything is possible. So definitely keep an eye on the 200-day weekly moving average at about 23K for Bitcoin. That's this red line again. If we get rejected, we're going lower. If we stand on top and support, we're going higher. And that's why it's a make or break week. Now, moving past the DXY and Bitcoin, I want to talk a little bit about institutional adoption. So we have just seen this is the most recent update just a few days ago. We've seen a increase and consistently increase of institutional inflows into Bitcoin and investment into Bitcoin. So this is all in millions. We've seen 28.2 week over week come in. We've seen month to date 46 million, year to date 480 million into Bitcoin from large institutions. And we're also seeing, and I want to point this out as well, we're seeing a major outflow from Ethereum. So we're seeing people and institutions mainly saying, hey, I want the digital gold, the store of value. We want to be betting on Bitcoin. And that's very, very clear here. We're seeing serious confidence being destroyed in Ethereum right now in terms of institutional investment. And maybe that's because of the uncertainty around the merge or whatever else they're going through right now. But right now in the bear market, it seems that institutions are taking this up as a buying opportunity, and they're pouring millions into the asset. So definitely keep your eyes on inflows, as well as that is an important metric in terms of overall buyer interest, because this is really where, these types of buys is what pushes Bitcoin up or down, right? It's not you and me buying and dollar cost averaging a few $100 at a time or a few grand at a time. It's these folks who are buying millions week over week, sometimes, hundreds of millions week over week. So definitely something that we need to be focusing on as well, and wanted to update you guys there in terms of institutional inflow. And the last thing I want to point out about institutions, and this is more kind of a long-term play, long-term look at where Bitcoin is going to be going. And this is somewhat old news, but it plays off of what recently happened as well. So if you guys remember, Fidelity actually added Bitcoin as an option to 401k clients. They are the largest 401k provider in the US, at least. They have 20.4 million clients and managers, and clients, and they manage nearly $2.7 trillion in assets. So a ton of money. Now, that's unique, right, that they added that to Bitcoin. But what's going to follow most likely is that their competitors like Charles Schwab, Edward Jones, Vanguard are going to have to start offering that to clients as well, or they risk losing those clients to Fidelity, where they would actually provide Bitcoin as an option. So definitely a really, really good point made here. And the other thing I wanted to point out here about institutional adoption is the fact that KPMG, who's one of the largest accounting firms in the world, their Canadian branch will be purchasing Bitcoin this year. They announced that back in February of this year. But what's interesting is that that's going to kind of kick off this snowball effect in the accounting world, and specifically for KPMG, because their clients are some of the most profitable companies in the world. They manage the books for over 20% of the Fortune 500, and those are the biggest companies in the world, right? So they have a lot of access to capital, and they can get that pretty quick. And what I love is KPMG's managing partner, his name is Benji Thomas. This is what he said about crypto and kind of explaining the rationale behind this massive investment that they're putting forth this year. And so he said, this investment reflects our belief that institutional adoption of crypto assets and blockchain technology will continue to grow and become a regular part of the asset mix. So they're not doing this as, hey, we just want to throw our hat in the ring, or hey, we just want to experiment with this. They see this as a viable part of their plan to grow well into the future. And they see crypto adoption growing, not slowing down anytime soon. So it's great to hear that from people who have their eyes on this all the time and who are managing billions, if not trillions, in assets any given year. So really exciting stuff there. I think that's more so, hey, long-term institutional adoption and long-term more money coming in, both retail and institutional. So wanted to point that out as well. But that's everything I have for you guys today. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you got somewhat of a unique look into some of these charts and what we're going to be doing this week in terms of price action for Bitcoin. Let me know what else you want me to cover, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.